when I get attacked like that, I'm like, whoa, whoa, dude. It's yeah. Welcome to Whiskey and SV. I'm your host Sam, and tonight I will be reviewing the Springbank 10 Palo Cortado. All right, I'm super excited about this one because this is very hard to get. I think everywhere, but specifically in the US. And there were only 10,200 bottles of this made. Now, if you know anything about Springbank, you know that it's basically kind of like the Buffalo Trace of Scotch whiskey. It's everything they have is super tatered, and it's extremely hard to find, and usually flipped on secondary for ridiculous prices. And unfortunately, I had to pay close to secondary for this. This was a bottle split with a friend of mine, and we ended up paying, I think, $380, so $190 for half a bottle. So yeah, a little bit expensive. But having being a whiskey enthusiast and having this channel, I kind of justified to myself that okay, I kind of need to have this. Since then, I actually have been able to acquire a full bottle from Plumpjack Spirits in San Francisco, so I'm super excited about that as well. Okay, so let's get to the review. Let me tell you actually a little bit more about this particular series. So this series, Springbank, started in 2022. And the idea is that over, I think, 6 different years, they want to do an experiment of their whiskey finished in 6 different sherry casks. And the first one they did in 2022 was the Springbank 10 PX, Pedro Jimenez. So Pedro Jimenez is a type of sherry whiskey that is very sticky and fruity and sweet. And this first version, as you can see, which I have here, is much darker than the new Palo Cortado. I'm actually not sure what Palo Cortado, what region it is from or what the characteristics are. I have tasted it, so I have my opinions, but we'll get to that, right? But it's much lighter, and yeah, I'd never even heard of it. I've never tried any whiskey that was finished in Palo Cortado. This was like the first time that I'd even hearing about it. But basically, going back to the way Springbank is going to do these, is that I think they're going to do 6 years, and every year they have this maturation of 7 years in a bourbon cask, and then they finish it for 3 years in that particular sherry type cask. And this first one was 7 years in bourbon, 3 years in Pedro Jimenez. This one was distilled in 2013, and then probably stayed there for 7 years in a bourbon cask, and then finished for 3 years in a Palo Cortado casks. So it would be interesting to put this together and see like if how different they are and what their characteristics are. Without further ado, I'm gonna make myself some tiny pours here, so we can talk about them. I actually think it would be interesting to compare these with my 15-year as well. So I might do that at the end as well, because I do think the 15-year, especially from 2022, was extremely nice. And well, given how expensive these are and how hard they are to acquire, a better alternative, frankly, I think would be the 15-year. So okay, let's look at that difference in the color, though. It's just night and day difference. Okay, let's do the nosing first. First, we have the Palo Cortado. So there's some light peaty notes here, but mostly the sherry comes across as a more kind of like a orange, tangerine, apricot, kind of like overcooked, those types of fruits. And yeah, it's more like a orange and yellow type fruits, basically. Okay, let's compare it to the PX. So again, like a little bit of the peat, especially like if you're sensitive to peat like me. But the main difference is that this is much more fruity. It doesn't have there's some astringency and kind of I would say metallic type notes coming from this. They're completely missing from this. This is much more dark raisins and prunes and just like kind of these aromatic sort of dark fruits. Much more inviting nose. I think I significantly prefer the PX for sure. Okay, let's try the palate on the Palo Cortado. Whoa. um, there is an obnoxious amount of metallic arrival on that, and it's surprising how, yeah, how like that metallic note is just it leaves me a bit speechless, to be honest. Um, I'm not a huge fan of that arrival. So past the metallic attack that you get, I get the fruity notes that kind of you get on the nose. They come across as a sweet kind of syrupy mouth coating flavor. But then when they wipe up, when they kind of like die away, we go back to that kind of metallic note, which is also it also has like a bit of like tartness from oak, and this lingeringness is kind of like a bitter and dark tart kind of like finish. So it's I would say it's quite a challenging whiskey to enjoy, and well, I guess that's like the nice way of saying probably not for me. Um, I do think it's super interesting that Springbank is trying all these different things, but yeah, I'm not sure. It's it's that metallic note is just whew. Okay, let's try the PX. Much nicer aromatic nose. Yeah, I get the Springbank funk in this much more, despite it being kind of it is much more well-rounded. First of all, it doesn't have that crazy metallic like kind of attack at the beginning. It does have some metallicness, but like not definitely not nowhere near as much as that. But generally, despite being like sweeter and kind of like more like raisins and prune type dark fruit notes, I do get that kind of like Springbank funk much more in this than I get in this. And that could be just because like I'm super sensitive to metallic notes, and when I get attacked like that, I'm like, whoa, dude. It's yeah. So yeah, I think the PX overall much more fruity, much more like dark fruits, much more well-rounded, and it lingers much sweeter. There's no bitter or like kind of like tart notes here. It does have a little bit of that metallic note. So I think it'll be super interesting to actually like do a comparison with the 15. And I have the 15 down here. This is the 15 from 2022. I think it's from the April 14th, 2022. And this is one of my favorite Springbank bottles. It's actually like I prefer it even to the 18. Well, I mean, I've tried a couple of 18s, but most of the 18s I've tried are primarily, I guess, like bourbon type finishes. I do prefer a sherry finish. However, it is a bit of a shame for to really put so much sherry in a Springbank, because it masks kind of like the spirit itself, right? So, but let's try this on the nose, right? Interesting. This actually reminds me a lot more of like a wine finished whiskey. Like kind of, I was trying the Green Spot yesterday, the Quail's Gate, which is a Pinot Noir type of finished Irish whiskey, and this kind of reminds me of that. But like the color again, like if you look these two, the kind of the 15 is way kind of darker. I guess if you compare it to the PX, well, maybe the PX is actually darker. Yeah, the PX is actually a tinge darker. But let's see what it is on the palate. This is the 15-year on the palate. That is a much more inviting nose, by the way. Not, I think the nose on the PX is better, but this is way smoother. But also, it's not a fair comparison, to be fair, because these are both 55% ABV. This is 46, so it's like 9% ABV difference. So the perceived smoothness or less harshness could be just because it's lower ABV. But like it does feel there's no sharp edges on this. It's just overall a much more well-rounded experience. It doesn't attack you. It doesn't like do anything weird, and yeah, it's just it feels great. There's some mineraliness to this as well, which there's definitely not any mineral kind of like flavors to these. These go more towards metallic. This is more towards like minerals. Kind of like I think about, you know, whetstones and limestone, that type of flavors, and yeah, way sweeter. Even this, I would say this on the palate, this is way even sweeter than the PX. It's just a huge amount of kind of like yeah, like syrupy type, you know, dark fruit kind of syrup notes, and um, it's I would say the one knock I would say about this is I wish it was a bit higher strength, so I could compare it to these higher strength ones, because I do prefer my whiskeys to be a little bit higher strength, not to attack me like this does, but you know, to kind of like get a little bit of more oomph from it. But uh, just sitting down and enjoying this, it's a great whiskey. I would say the knock I would have for this 15-year though is that it's it's so soaked in sherry that it's really hard to get the Springbank characteristics from it. So that Springbank funk, hard to pull out of this one, I think. Yeah, I would almost call this a sherry bomb. It's not really. There's obviously at the end like you get Springbank, but it's not a full Springbank experience, right? It's just more like lots of sherry and then I can see the Springbank. That's kind of like the experience here. All right, so scores. I never do scores on this channel, so this is probably like the first time I'm going to attempt to do a score. So for me, the scores have to be sort of comparison, but I would say anything above 90 for me would be this is like definitely should buy, like even have a backup and whatever. And for these, I would say if I didn't take into account the fact that they're limited editions and they're, you know, I'm like super enamored by the experience, they would be in the like 85 range. I would say like the PX would be like more like 86, 87. This would be like more like 82. And the 82 is just because I feel like I should give this more of a chance. Like I've only had like a few drams from it. This is maybe like my third time trying it, maybe fourth time. And yes, it's not really my cup of tea, but I do feel like it's worth to spend the time and try to challenge myself to kind of like see what it is that other people are seeing in this, right? So, but if it's just pure enjoyment, I would give this like a 5 because it's that's I don't enjoy that metallic note. But when it comes to this one, I think I would also give this like an 8.9 or something. If I was to take into account the availability and everything, I would say definitely go for the Springbank 15. It's still obviously not easy to find, but it's obviously going to be much easier and cheaper to find than these, because these are going to be running you probably in the order of $400 to $500 versus this probably more like 150, 160-ish. So hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a little bit different than what I do usually. I usually do blinds, but I thought these are kind of significantly different from each other, so it doesn't really make sense to do like a blind in this case. So yeah, join me next time, and hopefully we'll do more of these types of review type episodes. Have a good one, and see you next time.